Hello and welcome to Sewist Online Pattern Making Software channel. In the previous lessons we learned to place points on the screen using the functions point, apply, meet, intercept, and compass. We also learned how to draft lines and refer to their properties. In this lesson we talk about arcs. In Sewist Software, arc is a simplified curve. To create an arc, we need two reference points. I created points P1 and P2 using the function point. Now we can draft the arc. The syntax of this function is as follows: the word arc, brackets open, starting point, end point, angle at the starting point, angle at the end point, brackets close. Let us look at the angles in more detail. Angle 1 is next to point 1, and angle 2 is next to point 2. I shall draw the 0 degrees line here. Please pay attention to this tiny control point and the thin lines that are directed towards it. You cannot click and drag the control point, as it is defined by the formula in the function. It is shown in the draft to demonstrate where the slope of the curve is directed, both at the starting point and at the end point of the curve. The angle between this thin control line and 0 degrees is actually angle 1 and angle 2 of the arc. If you hover an arc, you will see a small pop-over window that lists the name of the arc, its length, coordinates of the first and the second point, and the first and the second angle. The first point is highlighted in violet, and the second point is highlighted in yellow. Once you have drafted an arc, you can refer to its properties. For example, property point L stands for the length of the arc. Property point P1 stands for the first point, and property P2 stands for the second point. Property point A1 stands for the first angle, and property point A2 stands for the second angle. When placing the point P3, I referred to second point of our arc as the reference point. I also referred to the length of the arc and divided it in two. This distance equals 1/2 of the arc's length. I refer to the angle of an imaginary line from P1 to P2 in order to place point P3 in the same direction. We can now draft a new arc. Let's give a name to it, say arc 1. I wanted my second arc to connect really smoothly to the first one. That is why I used the angle of the first arc and added 180 degrees to it. The control points of the two arcs lie on the same line. The transition between them is so smooth that you wouldn't be able to see it if we hide the point here. You may be wondering why it is important to pay attention to angles and set them mathematically, rather than just moving the control point of the curve around. In pattern making, you must always work with shapes that will have to be connected to one another with a seam. When a seam is done, what you want to see is a smooth edge above the seam, and not a kink, bump, or a pointing corner. Working with angles lets you design the shapes in such a way that they can be smoothly connected to other lines or curves that will later become a seam. Let us see which properties an arc has in Sewist Software. We have already mentioned length, points, and angles. In the pop-over window you can see these main properties, and all numbers are rounded to the second decimal. If you are curious to see the arc's properties with the utmost precision, you can use the info command. The system will provide further information in console. Other properties of the arc are as follows. Point x1 stands for the x-coordinate of the first point. Point y1 stands for the y-coordinate of the first point. Point x2 stands for the x-coordinate of the second point, and point y2 stands for the y-coordinate of the second point. You can also refer to the difference between x and y coordinates of the first and the second points. These are properties point dx and point dy. For example, property point dx lets you know how higher is one point than the other. These two properties always return a positive value. The additional properties are used rarely in drafting. In most cases you will need the main ones, the length, the points, and the angles. I hope you enjoyed this short video about Sewist online pattern making software. If you have any questions, you are welcome to ask them in comments to this video, or in our forum at www.sewist.com. We also encourage you to follow us on YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. Happy sewing!